everybody. Thanks for coming out. It's very happy to be here today to talk about something very important. Before I introduce the first speaker, I just wanted to think back to when I was a staffer back in the late 80s, 1980s, in the provincial treasurer's office, and learned that we were going to stop keeping the income from the Heritage Trust Fund in the Heritage Trust Fund, and was very, very disappointed that that was deemed to be necessary at that time. And as time has gone on and the decades have gone through, and I see what has transpired in other jurisdictions that took the Heritage Fund idea and used it in their own countries, that we have made some changes, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about some of those changes and how that we expect that to meet our objectives. So with that, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce Premier Danielle Smith, Premier of Alberta.
Thank you. Well, thanks, Miles. Thanks for sharing that little bit of history with us in this incredibly beautiful historic home, Lougheed House, where we're making I think a really important announcement today for the future of Alberta. But before I make today's announcement, I just want to update the public on some recent conversations I've had with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, my colleagues on the Council of the Federation, Minister Dominic LeBlanc, and Minister Jonathan Wilkinson. On November 25th, President Trump publicly warned that he would impose tariffs on Canada unless we take action on critical border issues such as cracking down on fentanyl, other illegal drugs, and illegal immigration. And I've been clear from the beginning that we must take President Trump's statements on border security seriously and to take action immediately, rather than focusing on inflaming the issue with rhetoric around retaliation. My fellow premiers have been asking for serious action on these issues as well. Today, U.S. President Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary nominee, Howard Lutnick, stated during his confirmation hearing that, quote, "If we are your biggest trading partner, show us the respect, shut your border. This is a separate tariff to create action from Mexico and action from Canada. As far as I know, they are acting swiftly, and if they execute it, there will be no tariff. And if they don't, then there will be." Let me say it again. The one thing that we can do this week, in just the next couple of days, to have the best chance to avoid tariffs is to show clear and unequivocal action to secure the border. This should start with the appointment of a Canadian border czar to work with the new American border czar to jointly crack down hard on fentanyl and illegal migrants. Is this likely to end the threat of tariffs entirely? I don't think so. I think there'll be other things that we will need to work on, and we will do so. But I am convinced, after speaking with dozens of elected U.S. representatives, administration officials, and the President himself, that this is the most important first step. Today, I reiterated this to the Premiers, Minister LeBlanc, Minister Wilkinson, and Prime Minister Trudeau, and I hope it is acted on by the end of this week before February 1st. That is why why we also sent a Fox News crew to the Coutts border today to showcase the work Alberta has been doing to secure our border, including the establishment of a new interdiction patrol team within the Alberta Sheriffs to combat drug smuggling, gun trafficking, and other illegal activities along Alberta's 298-kilometer international boundary with the United States. This interdiction team will be supported by 51 uniformed officers equipped with carbine rifles, weapons for tactical operations, 10 support staff, including dispatchers and analysts, 4 drug patrol dogs, 10 cold weather surveillance drones capable of operating in high winds with dedicated pilots, 4 narcotics analyzers to test for illicit drugs. Additionally, Alberta's government will create a 2-kilometer deep critical border zone deemed critical infrastructure, allowing sheriffs to arrest individuals attempting to cross the border illegally or traffic drugs or weapons without the need for a warrant. I want to thank the federal government for accepting Alberta's request to send a Black Hawk helicopter to the border today, further demonstrating the actions we are taking collectively to secure the border. We want to ensure that the American people, along with their president and elected representatives, know that action is being taken on this issue, and we are hopeful that these Fox News appearances display our province's and our nation's commitment. Now, to the announcement today. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm pleased to be at the Lougheed House with Minister of Finance, Nate Horner, as well as the MLA for Fish Creek, Miles McDougall, to share some details about our government's work on and intentions for the province's Heritage Fund. Former Alberta Premier Peter Lougheed recognized the wisdom of saving for the province's future. He recognized that Alberta can't rely forever on non-renewable resource revenues to fund programs and infrastructure. And so almost 50 years ago, his response was to create the Alberta Heritage Savings Trust Fund to save and invest some of those revenues. When speaking about it in the legislature, he asked, and I quote, "Are we prepared as a province to put aside substantial sums of current revenues from the sale of non-replaceable crude oil production for the sake of our children and of our grandchildren, and not make it available for current revenue needs, to use it for that day when some wells may have gone dry?" End quote. Well, Alberta's wells are nowhere near dry, and demand for oil and gas will continue to grow for the decades to come. Alberta is one of the world's cleanest, safest, and most reliable energy suppliers. So we'll continue to produce those resources responsibly in line with ever higher standards and lower emissions. But no matter how far into the future, there will come a time that we may be unable to rely on those revenues. And we cannot hide from that reality now. Instead, now is the time to redouble our efforts into building the fund up to sustain Alberta for generations to come. In 1985-86, the 10-year annual report of the fund highlighted not only how the fund was benefiting Albertans, it looked to the future, saying, quote, "The Heritage Fund will continue to play a stabilizing role in our economy and will help protect Albertans from the volatility of the world energy situation. With the Heritage Fund, Alberta is in a strong position to respond to present and future challenges." End quote. Unfortunately, Lougheed's example wasn't followed consistently. Over the years, the fund received only limited contributions. Money was spent instead of reinvested, and Albertans missed out on hundreds of billions of dollars in potential returns. If we had just reinvested the income earned in our Heritage Fund from the Lougheed government's initial deposits of about $12 billion in the late 70s and early 80s, even without investing an extra dollar, our Heritage Fund would be worth over $250 billion today, earning between $12 and $25 billion per year in revenue. But it's not too late. We are renewing Premier Lougheed's vision of building up the province's savings with an eye to the future. I'm happy to say we are growing the Heritage Fund with a long-term plan. Our goal is for the province to have at least $250 billion in the bank by 2050. That's the minimum amount required for the fund to be truly beneficial. Only 5 years ago, the balance of the Heritage Fund was at $16 billion, barely $4 billion more than its value in 1987. But our government has steadily grown the fund for 5 straight years. Our contributions represent an important starting point to growth, and because of them, the Heritage Fund balance now sits at about $25 billion today. This puts us on the right track. But contributions alone won't get us to $250 billion. We also need to have guidelines in place so that we can continue to grow the fund to secure a strong financial future for our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Between 1977 and 2011, withdrawals from the Heritage Fund were nearly identical to the cumulative net income it received. That type of attitude towards the fund is unsustainable and lacks the foresight that former Premier Peter Lougheed had. And that's why we passed legislation requiring the Treasury Board to authorize any withdrawals. It's also why our fiscal framework requires all of the interest generated by the fund to stay in the fund to grow it. And it's why when prices are high and we do have surpluses, we will invest a portion of those surpluses in the fund. It's all part of the plan. We also want to ensure capital and returns remain in the fund until 2050 so that we can truly grow it and have a sovereign wealth fund that can supplement, if not fully replace, the unpredictable revenue we receive from our natural, non-renewable resources. This will take political will over a long period of time. It will also take a strong management team headed by experts from Alberta and abroad. So I'm pleased to announce that we have created the Heritage Fund Opportunities Corporation, which will be chaired by Joe Lougheed, one of former Premier Lougheed's children, and a lawyer with experience in private equity, corporate governance, and many other areas. The corporation will oversee the fund, make investment decisions, learn from other global wealth funds, and deliver high returns. They will be guided by 3 principles in their work: independence, professionalism, and transparency. It is critical that the Heritage Fund Opportunities Corporation be free to make the right decisions for long-term growth without interference from government, which is why we've set it up as an arm's-length agency. A broad group of directors will bring deep financial experience so that it can focus on improving long-term Heritage Fund investment growth outcomes. And the corporation will provide regular reporting by way of detailed quarterly and annual reports on investment performance and governance factors, which will be made available to the public. The creation of the Heritage Fund Opportunities Corp will elevate the Heritage Fund Opportunities will elevate Alberta's global investment reputation under a robust governance framework. It will be supportive of strategic international investments and partnerships that drive new and profitable opportunities for Albertans and better have Heritage Fund investment outcomes deliver over the long term. When you look at the time frame and the rules we put in place, our intent is clear. We are not using the Heritage Fund to supplement the budget. We are genuinely saving for a day that won't arrive for decades, but which we know surely will come. Alberta needs to prepare for an era when oil and gas revenues aren't a mainstay of provincial spending. We are going to make the most of this opportunity because we want to do everything we possibly can to protect Albertans and to build strong fiscal foundations. That means planning, prudence, and discipline, so that we don't fall into the trap of always spending now and discounting the future. Resisting the urge to turn on the taps in response to every challenge is tough and not necessarily popular, but we will stick to our guns. It's what Albertans need and it's what they deserve. And now with that, I would like to invite Finance Minister Nate Horner to say a few words.
Thank you, Premier. Pleasure to be with everyone today. Today our government is investing in a stronger tomorrow. This plan to grow the Heritage Fund is more than just numbers and strategies. It's about ensuring that we are preparing a secure future for our families, children, and grandchildren. It is our commitment to ensuring Alberta remains the best place to call home long into the future, with our plan to grow the Alberta Heritage Savings Trust Fund to at least $250 billion by 2050. Many of us know the importance of planning ahead. We all know the value of having a savings account, whether we are actually able to set money aside for it or not. While we manage day-to-day expenses, it's important to know that we are putting money aside for unforeseen expenses, but also for a time when we are retired or potentially lose our income. That's the same motivation at play with our plan for the Heritage Fund. Alberta is blessed with abundant natural resources. This year, Alberta expects to bring in about $20.3 billion in forecast oil and gas revenues. This accounts for more than 26% of the 24-25 budget and goes a long way to support our province. But that revenue is increasingly volatile, risking our budget and our economy. Since fall 2024, oil prices have been fluctuating sometimes below $70 per barrel, and each dollar drop in price reduces revenue by approximately $630 million. I've been spending days in meetings with my cabinet colleagues. January is a time where I don't get a lot of sunshine because of the time the members of Treasury Board spend in budget deliberations reading spreadsheets. But as we put together Budget 2025, the price of oil is something we have to factor into every decision. And unfortunately, our oil revenues do not grow with our population. That is why it is so important to plan ahead now. We are committed to grow the Heritage Fund so that it provides long-term economic security for future generations. To achieve this, we must prioritize reinvestment of annual earnings that will compound over the long term and achieve meaningful growth year over year. This was the vision former Premier Peter Lougheed and his government had when they created the fund in 1976. As the Premier mentioned, his son Joe will be the chair of the Heritage Fund Opportunities Corporation. They would put a portion of Alberta's oil and gas revenue away so that the next generations would benefit from it. And initially, all the investment income from the Heritage Fund was reinvested into the fund with no withdrawals. In just 10 years, the fund achieved extraordinary growth from 88 million to about 1.6 billion, an increase of more than 18 times its original size. If this fund had been maintained over the last 5 decades, the Heritage Fund could have been upwards of 250 billion today, generating more than 20 billion annually. We've had some success already. As the Premier mentioned, since 2019, the fund has grown by nearly 50%. We're restoring the original intended vision of the Heritage Fund, but strengthening the fund with a modern, sophisticated approach. Using the tools and expertise available to us today, we can grow the Heritage Fund to create lasting wealth for future generations. In fall 2024, we established the Heritage Fund Opportunities Corporation. Supported by a world-class board, the new corporation will govern and support the growth of all Heritage Fund assets, ensuring we maximize returns. This structure draws on global best practices from countries that have achieved long-term success in managing similar funds. In the fall, I traveled to Singapore and Japan, where I met with 4 of the 5 largest sovereign wealth funds in the world and had discussions around these best practices. With a mandate to deliver long-term maximization of Alberta's provincial wealth, the board will be grounded in the principles of stewardship, independence, and enhancing the Alberta identity. Of course, we know investment portfolios never go up in a straight line. That is simply a natural part of investing, but we are confident in our ability to navigate complexities along the path to prosperity. The new corporation will strengthen partnerships with global sovereign wealth funds to elevate the Heritage Fund's profile internationally, unlocking access to new top-tier opportunities. The initial deposit to the new corporation will be the $2 billion earmarked for the Heritage Fund in Budget 2024. The initial results and progress of this work are expected by the end of the 25-26 fiscal year. I know that many of you had questions around the income from the fund and our newly established practice of leaving the income in the fund at our quarterly fiscal updates, and hopefully today's announcement shows you the rest of our plan. Growing the Heritage Fund from 25 billion to 250 billion in 25 years is an ambitious and bold goal. If it was easy, it would have happened already. Peter Lougheed had a vision that the fund would eventually replace resource revenue, but very quickly the revenue was appropriated for other tasks. But with our plan, this growth is achievable. We have set new standards for the Heritage Fund by adopting proven strategies from countries like Norway, Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand, and we will follow their leadership in governance and investment excellence. This is a key part of our fiscal commitment and our broader plan for Alberta's long-term financial independence and stability. And by reinvesting returns each and every year, we will ensure a lasting legacy for the province, one that honors the past, supports the present, and secures the future for generations to come. This moment in history, with geopolitical uncertainty, a decade of volatile energy prices, and countless other factors, show us that we are at the moment for firm resolve to make the decisions that are tough and rise to the moment. The Premier has provided that vision and the leadership to grow the fund. We must continue it for the sake of our children, grandchildren, and future Albertans. So thank you very much. Sure.
Thank you very much, Minister. Justin, if you could manage the questions from the media. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, MLA McDougall. We're going to start here on the floor. Please line up behind the microphone here, and then we'll go to the phones. Please state your name, your outlet, and who your question is to, and we will, as always, go with one question, one follow-up. Please go ahead.
Premier Carrie taking the Globe and Mail.
Can Carrie go to the mic?
I'm good here. I'm just a few feet away.
Okay.
Who would you
Well, I think we record it, so I think if you wouldn't mind going to the mic. It's just right 2 steps in front of you.
who would you suggest should be the borders are?
A general. Whoever it is, we've got lots of retired generals. I had a former retired general be my deputy minister, Paul Winnick. I've volunteered his name up, but that's who I think it should be to show that we're serious.
You have volunteered, Paul?
I volunteered his name.
Just now, or you have?
No, I did it in front of Jonathan Wilkinson while he was sitting right there. My DM, of course, as you know, is leaving to to join PEGA. I don't know if he'll take him up, but that's the kind of person that we need. Someone who understands military operations, who understands deployment, who understands the seriousness with which we have to take this issue. So I don't know who the federal government has in mind, but that's the kind of person that we need.
How was your suggestion received by the federal government?
You'll have to ask them. I think that what the issue that we have right now is that we have some turmoil in politics at the moment. We have a voice at the table, Dominic LeBlanc, who I think is a consistent voice. He's developing the relationships, but we're going to see within 39 days, I think, a change in Prime Minister. And then after that, there may be another change in Prime Minister. I think that's why it needs to have an independent person who, with any luck, would be able to withstand changes of government so that we are able to seamlessly ensure that we can work with the Americans on this.
Thanks, Carrie. We're done. Go ahead, Rick.
Rick Bell, Postmedia. What are your thoughts about the fact that you're making these, you want something to happen on the border, you want to see more evidence, you want to see the TV crews out, et cetera, and we're just a couple of days away from, 3 days away from February 1st. And as you said, U.S. President Trump has talked about this for a long time. You've talked about it for a long time. What are your thoughts about why it has taken this long for people to suddenly, as we see in one of the newspapers, send photos to Donald Trump of what's happening on the border? Why did it take this long? When most of the time we've been talking about retaliation, talking about now relief packages, talking about who's on Team Canada, who's not on Team Canada, who's a traitor or not a traitor. A lot of time was occupied with that, not as much on this. Now somebody in the States says this is the issue. What is your thoughts?
Well, I've always said that this is the issue, and I've always said that we should be focused on doing everything we can to avoid tariffs, and that's how I've conducted myself in all of my public statements and in all of my interactions with the U.S. administration. And now we see a pathway. It's been confirmed that the person who's going to be making the decisions on tariffs said in his hearings today that we can avoid them if we demonstrate serious effort to make sure that we don't have bad guys coming into the border, across the border into the United States. So I have told my counterparts we should always take that seriously. We should always act. That's why I was the first to announce a robust border plan, $29 million, why we had already been we were able to deploy it so quickly because we had already been in the process of training. When we announced it, we'd already had 35 of those officers trained up in commercial vehicle inspection. And so we were able to move very quickly. Other provinces were too. I think you've seen in Manitoba that they deployed conservation officers. I think in Ontario and Quebec, they announced that they would have provincial officers. And I'm pleased that the federal government, they managed to commandeer some Black Hawk helicopters for the RCMP and have already started those patrols in Manitoba a couple of days ago and in Alberta today. So I think that there has been a sense of urgency. I think perhaps everybody's come to the realization that, especially what we've seen in the last week, is show me, don't tell me, and so now we're showing.
Do you have a follow-up, Rick?
Yes. Again, I watched a lot of news coverage today, avalanche of news coverage. Most of it was, again, about what are going to be the retaliatory measures, number one. Number two, what is going to be the package of money that will go to people? In other words, a lot more coverage of post-February 1st, if it happens, rather than pre-February 1st, which is what you're talking about. So you're pushing something that is, maybe other people have done it, but the coverage has largely been about retaliation today and possible money that will go out the door in the future, not so much on what you're talking about. So I was asking you, what are your personal thoughts on having mentioned this again and again and again, and finally now, wow, 3 days to go, here we are?
Well, I've been consistent in my message. I feel like there may be a time, if the U.S. administration acts, that we would have that second conversation, but we're not there yet. And it's incumbent upon political leaders to do everything we possibly can to avoid a tariff war. The Americans are 10 times our size. I think we have seen with the skirmish with Colombia that the president is serious when he says what he wants and he doesn't get it. He started with a 25% threat. It moved to a 50% tariff. And then when he got what he wanted, it turned to 0. So I think that that should be a bit of a guidepost to what it is that the president is looking for. If his senior trade person says, be serious about the border, let's be serious about the border. And then let's see if that manages to avoid tariffs. I don't want to talk about retaliation. I want to talk about making sure we don't have to have that discussion because we don't have tariffs at all.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Go ahead, Jason.
Jason Marksoff, CBC. So last Friday, after you guys have had it for a while, you put the Davidson report out on the open website quietly on a Friday, no fanfare. Its recommendations go directly against what you've said, where you prefer vaccine choice, not banning or pulling vaccines from the market. What do you intend to do with these recommendations now that they are out? Besides read them. Reading them is an obvious thing. But what are you going to do beyond reading them?
Well, I was pleased to see that we had a broad cross-section of doctors able to look at our previous COVID response, identify processes that were in place, identify things that may have gone wrong, identify things that are now under question, like the efficacy of masks and the efficacy of this vaccine in children. And so I think we're going to take a look at that, and obviously we'll make some decisions about whether to move forward on any of the recommendations. But the point of it was to figure out what we do should there be another pandemic that we have to respond to, so that we don't make mistakes that hurt people. So I was pleased that they came forward with a report. I don't have an agenda yet of what we might implement, but I think we always have to make sure that in a world where we care about science, that all voices are heard. That's what science is. You actually hear different viewpoints so that you can make solid decisions on what you hear. And I think restoring the right of doctors to be able to speak their minds without punishment from their colleges, I think that's going to be important too. Otherwise, politicians will make bad decisions. So this is the kind of approach you should probably expect from me, that I will always seek out contrarian voices just to make sure I make the best decisions.
And your response to the remarks from the large medical associations in our province and our country, basically associations of doctors saying that you appointed anti-science people and they told the public anti-science things.
Well, anyone who doesn't think that science is a process of point counterpoint and then being able to synthesize information is somebody who doesn't believe in science. So I know there's been a narrative, and a narrative has been enforced by shouting down contrarian voices, and that's not what we're going to do. We're going to listen to every voice, and we're going to make our best assessment based on what we're seeing with the evidence, and the evidence has changed. The information that we've had over time and what we were told at the beginning is a little bit different than what we're hearing today, and so we've got to adjust to that.
Thanks. We're going to go to the phones for a few questions. Operator, can you please put through the first caller?
Your first question is from David Staples from the Edmonton Journal. Please go ahead.
Thanks for taking my call. Justin Trudeau has said that Canada isn't a problem for the U.S. at the border because less than 1% of migrants and less than 1% of fentanyl comes from Canada to the USA. Do you think the federal government has taken this particular threat seriously and is taking enough action to prevent the February 1st tariff? What's your sense of it?
I think that it has been acknowledged that the $1.3 billion commitment that they made was valued by our American counterparts. I think all of the provinces stepping up as well is being noticed. The question of whether it'll be enough, I guess we'll find out on February the 1st. We know that is what we have to work towards. It seemed to me that what Mr. Lutnick was saying suggested that he was encouraged by some of the actions that we were taking. And I think that we should continue to make sure that they understand that we take this seriously. What I would say is that it's not a matter of they're worse than we are. The matter is that we're worse today than we were 10 years ago. And that's what we've got to be assessing, is are there more migrants going across the border into the United States? Are they seeing evidence that there are drugs and other illegal activity happening in Canada that is impacting them in the United States? And I think we have to be honest about that and go back to the kind of environment where they trusted that we would be able to deal with these issues competently. And so I think we're making some strides on that. I guess we'll find out on February 1st whether they're enough.
You have a follow-up, David?
Yes. So there's a couple of schools schools of thoughts on this dispute with Trump. Some people think that he just loves tariffs. He wants to make a lot of money, to quote Trump, from tariffs, and there's little we can do. And the fentanyl and immigration issues are kind of a pretext so he can use executive power. That it really is about making a lot of money and bringing in tariffs. You've been talking to the Americans for a couple months now on this. What is your sense on what's the truth here of this matter?
He has said that he admires President McKinley, and when McKinley was in power, he was enthusiastic about tariffs as a mechanism to protect domestic industry and to generate revenue. So I think we have to take it seriously when he's just renamed a mountain after that president, that we should probably brush off some history books and figure out why. One of the things I've learned, though, is that President McKinley didn't tax raw materials because that administration understood that if you have raw materials at a low price or discount, and then you can do the value added in America that creates jobs and creates high value products that you can then sell at a high value. And that is the model for a lot of what we sell to the United States. We sell oil and gas. We sell critical minerals, we sell food, we sell auto parts. I would put them in that category as well, that auto parts go back and forth across the border multiple times. So I think Canada has a very good case to make, that if we can ensure that the components that go into making those value-added products are valuable to the United States and create jobs, then we might be able to avoid having tariffs altogether. That's one part of it, the answer. The other part of the answer, though, if you read Robert Lighthizer book, as you can imagine, I've been reading a lot of books to try to understand this administration. But if you read Lighthizer's book, there is a whole chapter on the frustration that the Americans have about value-added national sales taxes, because they don't have one. And so they look at a value-added national sales tax like the GST, or 5%, as creating an unfair playing field. It's in the advantage of Canadian businesses to sell into the American market to avoid those tariffs. They didn't single out Canada on that, maybe because our national sales tax is so low, but they're very irritated by Europe and the fact that Europe has value-added taxes in the order of 20%. So if you're looking at it as a border adjustment tax, if you're looking at it as him saying, hey, you're taxing our goods, we're going to tax yours at an equivalent rate, there may be something to that. I don't know. I think we'll find out as we continue to get more familiarity with this administration. What I do know is there are two deadlines that we face. The first one is get your border under control so that you avoid tariffs February 1st. The second one is the review that Lutnick is doing on that's due April the 1st to see if there's anything that represents an unfair trade relationship. And so if we can get a bit of a reprieve now so that we can make our case, have a little bit more time, then we're not out of the woods completely, but I think we'll get a better understanding of what the administration is looking for.
Thanks, Premier. Operator, next caller.
Your next question is from Adam McVicker from Global News. Please go ahead.
You guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Last night, Calgary City Council approved a plan for the Green Line LRT following the provincial alignment, the preferred alignment. How satisfied are you with the plan that was approved by City Council?
Well, I'm very excited that they approved the plan. We know that we've gone through looking at different options over the years. We were very concerned about the uncertainty and cost escalation that might come from a tunnel. So we did another look, came up with an alternative proposal. I know that it was hotly debated at Council, but we're pleased that they made the decision to go ahead. It'll allow shovels to get in the ground as soon as this early part of the year, and then we can continue to work on how we expand the alignment so that we can get out to the original vision of getting it all the way down to Seaton, as well as all the way up to 160th. I think we now have a little bit more of a realistic view about what that total project will cost. If we look at the numbers for this part of the line, it's probably $20 billion over the entire cost of the project. So it's going to take a little bit of time, build it out station at a time, but at least we're getting started on something that I think is going to be servicing a large number of commuters to get downtown.
You have a follow-up, Adam?
Yes, sir, I do. So when it comes to ultimately what the province wanted, an elevated alignment downtown, the council did approve committing to a functional study of that. So based on what I'm hearing here, does this sound like the province that you guys are in? It's like we're moving forward with this project, this Green Line's happening?
We're in, and we just have to talk to our federal counterparts to make sure. And what the indication that we had, although there is a little bit of turmoil at the federal level, the indication that we had is that if the city and the province could come to an agreement, that the federal funding would be there as well. I think the important part was getting started on the part of the line that has been fully scoped out so that we can then start doing the functional work on figuring out the details around the rest of it.
Thanks. We'll take one more on the phone, and then we'll return to the floor for a few more. Operator, can you put through our next caller?
Your next question is from Chris Carco from the Calgary Herald. Please go ahead.
Hi, Premier. Regarding today's announcement, why did the government need to create a new Crown Corporation to manage some of the investments for the Heritage Fund instead of leaving it in AIMCO? Why do you think that it needs to have a strategic objective like investing additional funds into technology or energy and infrastructure? And maybe more broadly, how do you address the concerns that some people might have that the government will get into picking certain winners or losers when it comes to certain sectors that it prefers or doesn't prefer?
Okay, a lot there. I guess I would start with the concept around the Heritage Fund Opportunities Corp. You have to envision it this way. The Heritage Fund Opportunities Corp will act like the asset owner. They will give the statement of investment policies and goals to AIMCO for the assets under management by AIMCO that are part of the Heritage Fund. But they will also, with the seed capital we're announcing today, invest in a different way that's beyond AIMCO's mandate, more in a sovereign wealth style investment. It's privileged access to similar institutions around the world. So AIMCO wouldn't be able to do that, and it's beyond their mandate.
Do you have a follow-up, Chris?
Yeah, a question for the Premier on a different topic. Can you tell me what is the status right now of discussions with the Pathway Alliance and the province of Alberta and the federal government on getting a deal done on their carbon capture project? And are you confident that a deal can be done before a federal election comes in potentially the next few months?
Well, I was talking about that today with Energy Minister Jonathan Wilkinson, and we've put on the table, of course, our tax credit. We think that there are some other mechanisms that might be able to move the project to a final investment decision, such as maybe narrowing its scope. I know that there is a lot of different moving elements to it, but if they have a narrow scope, perhaps they can get started right away. We also had a really good conversation about accelerating the deployment of nuclear technology. We know that there are a number of nuclear proponents in our province, and especially now that we're looking at building out for AI data centers, if we can use nuclear as the energy to decarbonize the bitumen development, as well as use it for the development and support of data centers, as well as our own grid. Maybe that's another way to be able to get to the target. At this moment, just the regulatory approval process, it would probably take 10 years to get to an approval on that. But those are the kind of conversations that we need to have. If the federal government needs to drop its emissions cap, I made that very clear, because their timeframes are too short. It would result in a production cap, which is the absolute worst time and worst conversation for us to be having with our American counterparts right now. But maybe if we had a longer time horizon, we could look at some of those elements of the plan as well. So that was the nature of our conversation today, and I hope we can get to some kind of final investment decision. We're prepared to work with the federal government and Pathways on that.
Okay, we'll come back to the floor for a couple more, and then we're done for the day. Go ahead.
Hey, Tim with CTV. A bit of a two-pronged question today about the Premier's meeting. First of all, do you feel like everyone's on the same page right now? I know that maybe wasn't the case 10 or so days ago. And second, did you hear about the package that's being proposed if these tariffs do get imposed? And what do you think of the package?
I don't have anything to say about the package because there is no package until there's tariffs, and there are no tariffs. And I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that there are no tariffs. That's where I think everybody should be focused. It's where I've been focused. And we've got 2 more days before we know what it looks like on February 1st, at which point we will probably reconvene as a group and then make some decisions at that time.
My second question, when all this tariff talk started, there was a really big effort on your part to talk to Trump, or appeal to Trump rather, about trade deficits and maybe just set the record straight a little bit. Have you tried to do the same thing when it comes to the border? Because anyone can see the stats here, see that most of the fentanyl comes in through Mexico, not Canada, and the same with illegal migrants. So have you tried to appeal to them at all on that front and just say, Canada's not the problem here. The majority of the problems in the States come from Mexico?
If you've watched anything that I've said over the last 2 years, you'll know that I think that illegal drugs killing our people is a problem. The drugs are coming in from somewhere, and the components are coming in from somewhere. It appears that much is coming in from Mexico, some of it is coming in from China, and it's killing our people. And so this is why we have been appealing to the federal government to stop their catch and release approach so that we can keep these bad guys behind bars. And it's why we've been shoring up our sheriffs. Not only do we have this interdiction team on the border, but we have as well a fugitive apprehension team. We've got our surveillance team, and we've got SCAN, which closes down drug houses. So we have taken this very seriously for the last 2 years, and I hope that the federal government takes it as seriously as we do. That being said, we've also dealt with it from the demand side. You cut off the supply by going after the dealers, but you cut off the demand by getting people into recovery. And you've probably seen the stats that we reduced our opioid deaths 38% year over year. So whether it's our virtual opioid dependency program, whether it's our treatment that we do in our provincial incarceration units, or whether it's our recovery-oriented system of care and our recovery communities, whatever we're doing is working, because it's an outlier from the rest of the country. So I would say that I'm not downplaying this at all. I think it is serious, and it's good for America, and it's good for us to get these bad guys and to stop them from killing our people.
Final question of the day. Go ahead.
Matt Skase, Canadian Press. Minister Horner, when you say sovereign wealth fund style, does that implicitly mean a more aggressive investment strategy? What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, you see, and I'll kind of circle back to the beginning, because I had to be proved this proof of concept over the last year with working with our team, because it was foreign to me as well. But they've proven to me in these meetings that it's really about access and partnerships. It's about deals and opportunities, that they're not looking for investment in a traditional pension-style asset manager that has liquidity concerns that they have to look forward to, maybe different concerns about availability at certain times. So it's a different way of looking at it. It's more like an asset owner mentality, but very diligent. Part of the team that we've been working with actually, teaches the board governance of potential board chairs of sovereign wealth funds around the world. So diligence still has to be incredibly high, but I'd say it's really about more opportunity and a different opportunity that we wouldn't have had before.
Following on that, when you say supporting areas that matter to Albertans, can you just expand on that? Is that investing more or a higher asset mix inside of Alberta?
Not necessarily. I think something that's important to our team in developing this Alberta model, it's not about necessarily investing in something that sets up physical shop in Alberta, but we see tremendous value in things, like if I asked you, assume you're an Albertan, I don't know you, you're here. If I asked you what's important to you, I'd think of things that are advantages for the province, like maybe our AI head start in U of A. Our fresh water, potentially water infrastructure with what we're seeing happening in the southern U.S. So I think it's about kind of leveraging opportunities where those partnerships could provide great opportunity for the province down the road, but that isn't necessarily the goal. It's kind of an ancillary benefit.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone. That concludes our press conference for today. Thank you.